We hope you enjoy today's story about Andrew and Courtney Simpson. Despite being childless, they were happy in their marriage for over a decade. Having children was something they both desired, but they waited until they were financially secure and could support a family on a single income. Both were in their 30s and were successful lawyers. Drew was a civil litigation attorney, while Court specialized in contract law for a well-known local firm. They were both members of a well-known local firm in their hometown. They had reached a financial level that allowed them to attend their first national convention of the American Bar Association. This was something they had both eagerly anticipated during the long drive to the hotel headquarters where they had booked a table for the event. Their main conversation topic was about having a child. They both agreed that the time had come. However, Courtney confessed that she was anxious about the prospect. It was at the board of directors reception on Wednesday evening that everything fell apart. The evening started well. Both individuals were enjoying the atmosphere and the company of their fellow lawyers. It was late in the evening, after the official part of the reception had ended, and there was more drinking, dancing, and loud conversations. Drew noticed that Court was in a playful mood, which was not inherently problematic. It often led to a marathon sex session at the end of the night. Courtney was a beautiful woman with a lively character. She was somewhat cunning and always flirtatious. This was not an unusual quality for her. Drew, on the other hand, was more calm and reserved. This was very unusual for a litigation attorney. Attorney at social gatherings. Drew typically blended into the background. He genuinely enjoyed watching people and observing how they interacted. If someone started a conversation, Drew would immediately participate. He rarely initiated conversations with people he didn't know. When his wife ordered her fourth mojito of the evening, Drew ran his hand along the inside of her stocking-clad thigh. He felt the warmth she radiated with his fingers that evening. He had spent an excessive amount of time on the dance floor with numerous partners and eagerly anticipated returning. Upon reaching their hotel room, Drew was struck by the realization that he had spent the majority of the evening with numerous partners. His eyes met his wife's, and he was overcome with desire. Her dark green eyes exuded a smoky sensuality, and he was eager to take her in the club. She leaned forward, exposing a considerable portion of her thigh and her voluminous chest. She uttered a low, approving whisper and purred, "I desire to engage in frivolous pursuits tonight, my dear. Without breaking eye contact, I can discern that I feel the same way, my love. Let us proceed to the room and survey our surroundings, my darling. We have never visited this city before." Drew reflexively surveyed the area, but he did not recognize anyone. "I don't think so," he replied, his tone indicating that he was uncertain. "Why, I want to have fun tonight," she stated, emphasizing the phrase with a noticeable intensity. He was taken aback. He was acutely aware of her implication, yet he was simultaneously distressed and disconcerted by her tone. As an experienced trial lawyer, he was accustomed to navigating complex legal matters. However, he was unprepared for this sudden and unexpected turn of events. The lawyer, he instinctively knew, was not to reveal his true emotions. Drew was unable to identify the source of this sudden change in demeanor. The only potential warning sign he could point to was his wife's reluctance to have a child, yet she had just agreed to do exactly that. "I understand," she said, "but what about our relationship?" She did not answer his question, though she was no novice trial lawyer. She was aware of the importance of not allowing the opposing counsel to distract her witnesses. She sighed and held his hand firmly. "Have I been a good wife in the 15 years we've been together? Have you ever had even the slightest doubt about my love and complete devotion to you since we became exclusive in our first year? Name one time, one instance, just one. I know I flirt, but have you ever doubted me when you saw me doing it?" One might think she had just made the simplest rookie mistake a lawyer could make, asking a question. She was unsure of the answer, but in truth, there was no mistake because she already knew the answer. There were no doubts about his commitment to their relationship until that moment. He had resigned himself to the inevitable. It was surprising how quiet she seemed in the middle of a nightclub with flashing lights, loud music, and a DJ surrounded by over 200 cheerful lawyers. Despite the noise, they spoke in normal voices but did not miss a single word from each other. She told him she was ready to have a baby and explained her desire. She asserted her right to a weekend for herself and stated that on Monday, she would cease using birth control pills. She then pushed his hand away, leaned back in her chair, and crossed her arms over her chest, emphasizing her ample cleavage and signaling that the conversation was over. He acknowledged that she had already chosen someone. She replied quietly but firmly, "All right, one last question. What compensation are you willing to pay?" He persisted, "What compensation? Don't play dumb with me. You're a contract lawyer. You know what compensation is. What are you offering? For my consideration, what price are you willing to pay?" At this juncture, he was on the brink of losing control. He was taken aback by the rapidity with which his life was unraveling. The only price we're discussing is your ego. He was acutely aware that by taking this action, he would cause her pain. He was prepared to spend the next 3 decades atoning for his actions. This has nothing to do with what we have. It's Wednesday evening, and we don't have to leave until Saturday morning. He would return to their hotel room on Friday evening, and they could begin working on having a baby. Everything would be fine. They had been together for over 15 years, more than 10 of them as a married couple. The dissolution of the marriage marked the end of their family unit, which would never be replenished. It also signified the end of all celebrations and milestones associated with family life, including birthdays, graduations, and other occasions where children would have been present. The couple would no longer have grandchildren to celebrate with or to cherish on their knees. The wife had just admitted to deliberately hurting her husband, which could be defined as premeditated harm. Despite this admission, she did not display any remorse or regret. For some reason, it did not matter to her. "All right, I'm going to bed. I don't know when I'll see you." "What was that?" "I don't know when I'll see you." She did not dwell on the remark any further but instead focused her attention on her target. She looked him directly in the eye and smiled seductively. She stood up and moved closer to him. She could not recall his name, but she remembered how he had pressed his aroused body against her thigh when they had recently danced some suggestive dances. The astonishing truth was that until that moment when she felt this man against her leg, she had never considered being unfaithful to Drew. She suddenly made a decision that would alter the course of her life in ways she could not have foreseen. Drew was uncertain as to how he managed to return to the room. He recalled being asked if he was okay while in the elevator, but his head was spinning and he was in mild shock from what had transpired. Everything seemed so unreal, as though it were a dream. Just moments ago, he had been fantasizing. He was overcome with the notion of the beautiful love he and Court would have, and the next minute, his marriage was over. He was unsure of the duration of his time spent seated on the edge of the bed, gazing at the wall. However, he eventually formulated a plan of action. He was cognizant of the necessity to take action and compelled himself to proceed. His residence was situated a mere 3.5 hours away. Drew was aware that he had a couple of days to complete the necessary tasks. He recognized that, for Courtney, he would not be an active presence for the next 48 hours. He had sufficient time to fulfill his obligations. The primary objective for the following morning was to report the theft of their joint credit cards. If circumstances were favorable, a hotel maid might discover the purse that Court had left in the room and take it without notifying the authorities. Drew did not intend to touch any belongings that his former wife had left in the room. Additionally, he anticipated that if the hotel maid took the purse, it would provide him with at least until Tuesday to complete the necessary tasks. The dissolution of their marriage would be straightforward and uncomplicated. They had no children, no property, and no joint assets. They had always maintained separate finances and contributed equally to shared expenses. Their income was approximately equal, making the divorce relatively simple. However, the subsequent process of starting anew was significantly more challenging. Drew promptly packed his belongings and was prepared to leave the residence. He briefly considered leaving a note for his former spouse, but ultimately decided against it. He proceeded down the hallway and headed towards the elevator, the sound of the automatic door closing echoing in the hallway. The corridor indicated that he was concluding his previous existence as he proceeded to the lobby. A notion suddenly occurred to him, prompting him to stop at the front desk to ascertain the situation. His wife was in the vehicle, an emergency had arisen at their residence, and they needed to depart without delay. They had left the keys in the room. The officious clerk pressed a couple of keys, and Drew realized the cards were deactivated. He smiled slightly as he exited the hotel, aware of the challenges Courtney would face in the coming days. 7 years later, Drew sat in a hotel restaurant, sipping iced tea. He then proceeded to await the arrival of his food. The seminar had been quite enlightening, offering a valuable learning experience that would prove beneficial in his practice of family law. He observed that the date on the newspaper, which had been left on the worn vinyl seat, was nearly 7 years to the day since his final divorce. He was struck by the realization that time indeed does fly. Initially, he was unsure if he had spoken the date aloud, and he felt a slight embarrassment. He then looked around to ascertain if anyone had heard him. He had not thought about Courtney in a considerable length of time, although his divorce had been relatively straightforward. The experience served to highlight the inherent unfairness of the situation. The no-fault system could be beneficial to the aggrieved party, provided that it is not exploited by those who are unable to resolve their own issues. Some individuals resort to childish behavior and attempt to create chaos for the other party, necessitating the intervention of the system to resolve matters. These cases exemplify the veracity of the adage that nobody wins in a divorce. This experience motivated Drew to switch his specialty to family law. He discovered that the majority of divorces occur because both parties have already made up their minds and there are few disputes. Both parties endeavor to resolve their differences as expeditiously and amicably as possible. He endeavored to resolve the situation as expeditiously and without undue distress as possible. He accepted any case that came his way, yet he particularly relished the opportunity to address the relatively uncommon cases involving infidelity, where he suspected that the spouse of his client was attempting to exert undue pressure on his client. His train of thought was abruptly interrupted by a voice. He still recognized her as Drew. "How are you?" he inquired. He then looked up and saw her. He was extremely surprised. He could not have been more shocked if he had been struck by a cattle pro. "Court, I believe it or not, I was just thinking about you. What are you doing at a family law seminar?" "I'm not attending. I'm here on another matter." "I sit down." "I'm sorry," he gestured for her to sit. "I'm really shocked to see you, so you'll have to forgive my manners." "I'm at a loss for words," she replied, sitting up straight and speaking in an angry tone. "You never even talked to me, Drew. You never responded to any of my attempts to contact you. You never said a word to anyone in my. Furthermore, I would be remiss if I did not mention that my mother, who was quite fond of you, was also affected by your absence. You did not attend any of the hearings, and you simply departed without saying a word to anyone. After 15 years together, I was at a loss for words. I had hoped for a gesture of some sort, even if it was simply to say, goodbye. However, you chose to leave without so much as a word. On that Monday evening, I was served divorce papers before I could even walk up to our porch. Upon finally gaining access to the apartment, I discovered that it was devoid of any personal items that might have been reminders of my marriage to Drew. I recognized that I was the victim of an act of selfishness that ultimately led to the dissolution of our marriage. If that is the extent of your response, I request that you refrain from further contact. I am genuinely remorseful for what has transpired, but I must ask you to leave me alone." He was visibly enraged, and the majority of the restaurant's patrons were now staring at them. She stood up and began to walk away, sobbing. At that moment, a whirlwind emerged, and it was the chattering twin sisters and their younger sibling. They immediately began to confront him with great intensity, as they typically did. His wife was walking right behind them. Behind them, she was laughing and smiling, but her smile quickly vanished when she saw his face. Her gaze darted to the rapidly retreating figure of Courtney, who was her daughter. Was it not Courtney, Drew? He could only nod his head, as he was occupied with the 3 children, without saying another word. His wife, Celia, quickly ran away. After Courtney Drew observed her catching up with Courtney, they commenced a conversation that concluded with Celia assisting Courtney in taking a seat. It appeared that they conversed for a minimum of 10 minutes, during which time they seemingly exchanged contact information. Celia then embraced Courtney, and they proceeded to take their leave. Celia returned to the table and, Drew then proceeded to take custody of the twins, guiding them to a corner of the room. Drew's eyes and mouth were observed to be wide open when Celia resumed her seat. She will be arriving at their residence in a couple of weeks, and the two of them will engage in a substantial discussion. There was no room for argument, so he simply nodded in agreement. He nodded and began to tend to the two young children in his care, who had become a significant part of his life. Later that evening in their hotel room, after the children had fallen asleep, Celia looked at him and asked if there was anything he wished to say or ask her. He took a deep breath and quietly said, "For the first few years, I wanted to. However, I might have been too proud to do so. Now, however, I have nothing to ask and I am glad I did not give her that chance back then." "You are joking, right? This cannot be serious." "It is very serious. Celia, if I had allowed her to talk to me back then, she might have said something that would have made me reconsider. But if that had happened, if that had occurred, would never have had the opportunity to meet you, and our 3 children would not exist. I do not believe that I need to speak with her, and I have no regrets." She embraced her husband and kissed him repeatedly. "You are adept at providing comfort to a woman in such a situation. However, that unfortunate woman requires your attention, and the least you can do is listen to her. I will comply with your request, but I question the value of this course of action. I anticipate that her responses will be limited to expressions of regret and vague explanations. While I am willing to engage in this conversation, I am uncertain if it will provide her with the resolution she seeks. I am aware that you have expressed concern for Drew's well-being. I understand your desire for me to be compassionate and understanding. However, I am unsure if I can fully align with your perspective. Perhaps you would benefit from expressing your frustration with her for a few minutes after seeing her. This may help you to move on from the past. You may be correct, but even if I exclude you and the girls from the equation, I realized before I met you that my life was better without her. The divorce made me reassess my life and what was important to me. I experienced the typical emotional turbulence that many individuals encounter when a marriage ends. However, this dissolution prompted me to undertake a critical self-examination, which I would likely have avoided had she not acted in a highly unwise manner." Drew paused to reflect and collect his thoughts. It is often said that the most significant achievements arise from our greatest setbacks. One might posit that significant personal growth can result from major setbacks. I am inclined to believe this is true in my case. I am currently happier practicing family law than I was practicing civil law. There are instances when I feel I am genuinely assisting people. I am aware that I do not earn as much money, do not drive a BMW, and do not reside in a lakefront condominium. However, I am happier. Now, what about her? Perhaps you should inquire about her current state of mind. What is the purpose of this line of questioning? Celia, I have no reservations about my current circumstances. He paused, then continued in a voice just above a whisper. Perhaps there is one aspect of this situation that I do regret. I should have discussed this with her mother. She was a kind woman. A woman I knew was kind and loving. She was a maternal figure to me, as both of my parents had passed away. I left without saying goodbye to her. Celia had nothing further to say. She had hoped that the meeting would be beneficial for Drew as it would be for Courtney, but now she had doubts. Was she imposing this on Drew and would it only serve to dredge up a past he no longer cared about? However, could she stop it? As it turned out, CIA didn't have to do anything. The meeting never happened. Then, the night before Courtney was supposed to come to town, Celia's phone rang. At that time, Celia dreaded answering the phone, fearing it might contain bad news. However, she reflexively answered, only to be greeted by a clearly upset woman. "Celia, this is Angela Jones's mother. I need to speak with Andrew." The ringing phone had woken Drew, and Celia handed him the receiver. "It's for you, Andrew. It's Angela." Yesterday afternoon, this statement was followed by the SBSP of someone in indescribable pain. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know what to say. Oh, God. This is my fault now." Drew was crying too, but he had no words. Celia, who had heard everything, clung tightly to her husband and was now openly weeping. She felt that somehow she was also to blame. "Andrew, I must acknowledge that I was partly to blame as well. She had many issues, and she brought them upon herself after the divorce. There were many things about her you didn't know. She left a sealed letter for you, which I hid from the police. No one knows about it except you and me. What do you want me to do with it? Please retain it for the time being and allow me to reflect on it. Would you be so kind as to do that? Of course. Andrew, I require your presence. Will you come? I shall be there as soon as is feasible. Mom, I am going to bring my entire family. I would like you to meet them. I am confident that you will love them. I shall call you back tomorrow and we shall devise a plan. Is there someone with you? You are currently alone. My friend Joyce is staying with me. I am eager to meet your family. I will speak with you tomorrow. The call concluded. Courtney's memorial service was held 7 days later on a cold but clear autumn day. As promised, Drew and his family were present. Only a few people attended. Despite being a highly competent lawyer, Courtney had no close friends. She was cremated, and her ashes were to be scattered in the park that she and Drew often visited when they were dating. Angela stated that it was the happiest time of Courtney's life. The loss of her daughter by suicide was an almost unbearable tragedy. However, Angela was soon overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for Celia and the 3 girls. By the end of the week, the girls had begun to refer to her as Grammy Angie. Angela informed Drew of the circumstances surrounding Courtney's life after he left. He was deeply affected by the details of her struggles with substance abuse, mental health issues, and risky behavior. Subsequently, Angela elucidated the circumstances surrounding Courtney's presence at the hotel with Drew. She had vanished with 2 men she had met at a nightclub, and was missing for over a week. Upon her return, Angela observed that she had sustained bruises. Additionally, Courtney was confronting the imminent loss of her partnership. At work, he was astonished at how one unfortunate and sudden decision had sent Courtney's life into a state of chaos and confusion the night before Drew's family was scheduled to return home. He and Celia engaged in a lengthy discussion and reached a series of conclusions the following morning. Drew pulled Angela aside while Celia kept the girls occupied. Celia and I would like to propose a change in your living situation. You are no longer constrained by any obligations to remain in your current residence. We do not expect you to make a decision immediately, but we would like you to give the matter serious consideration. We would be delighted to have you join us if you decide to do so. We will be available to assist with the necessary arrangements. Please take the time to reflect on this proposal. I am grateful for your consideration. I will take time to reflect on your proposal, but I must admit that I will miss her greatly. She experienced another emotional breakdown, and Drew provided support as she attempted to regain her composure. He then suggested that we discuss the letter. I believe the most prudent course of action would be to take the letter and place it unopened into the fireplace. I am aware that the letter is intended for you, Andrew, but I am not inclined to read it if you choose to give it to me. I will burn it, however I see fit, in order to provide you with the opportunity to retain possession of it. I am uncertain as to your perspective, but I am eager to maintain the memories I have of Courtney in their original state prior to the dissolution of our marriage. It is my hope that you will also be able to retain memories of that period in our lives. I am concerned that reading the letter may result in our recollection of her persona in the aftermath of the divorce. I have no desire to engage with the contents of that letter. I am offering it to you, with the understanding that you may choose to read it at your discretion. The sole stipulation I make is that you never, under any circumstances, discuss the matter with me. Angela was taken aback by his response but began to comprehend Andrew's rationale. She was eager to recall her daughter as she was prior to the unfortunate series of events that led to her downfall. Perhaps the letter contains genuine remorse and an acknowledgement of the pain caused by her actions, but it might also contain painful memories that Andrew had shared with her. Regarding his recent encounter with Courtney, it is possible that she may have expressed additional feelings of anger and guilt towards Andrew. It is evident that Courtney was not in an optimal mental state, particularly given the circumstances surrounding her interactions with Andrew and Angela. We extend our gratitude to all those who have listened to this discourse and have remained engaged until its conclusion. Should this discussion have piqued your interest, we kindly request that you subscribe to our channel, provide a like, and leave your comments.